A fisherman walking along a quiet stretch of the Lumber River hears a woman crying somewhere beyond the trees. Moments later, silence. Then a single gunshot. Within the hour, investigators were searching the area. What they discovered confirmed the worst. The woman was 30-year-old Mica Miller, the wife of a well-known South Carolina pastor. Just 2 days earlier, she had filed for divorce. Her death was ruled a suicide, but for her family, many members of the public, and those who followed the case closely, that ruling raised questions that continue to be debated. This is the Mica Miller case. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a city known for its beaches, growing neighborhoods, and close-knit church communities. At the center of one of those communities stood Solid Rock Church. Leading the congregation was Pastor John Paul Miller, a preacher whose sermons drew hundreds of worshipers each week. Beside him was his wife, Mica Miller. She led worship, sang during services, and played a visible role in the church's ministry. Friends and church members often described her as kind, welcoming, and deeply committed to her faith. To those attending each Sunday, the Millers appeared to be building both a family and a ministry together. They prayed together, served together, and represented the image many expected from a pastor and his wife. But behind that public image, the marriage had begun to unravel. By early 2024, allegations of conflict, separation, and emotional strain had emerged, painting a very different picture from the one seen inside the church. Understanding what happened in the weeks before Mica's death means looking beyond the public image and examining the events that unfolded behind closed doors. By October 2023, the marriage the congregation believed they knew had already begun to unravel behind closed doors. That month, Mica filed for divorce. In court filings, she alleged repeated infidelity and described what she said was a pattern of controlling behavior throughout the marriage. She also alleged that some of that conduct became physical. According to those filings, Mica claimed that whenever she tried to separate from John Paul, he threatened consequences. She said he would lock her out of the home, isolate her from her family, or reveal deeply personal struggles to the congregation where she led worship each week. It wasn't the first time she had tried to leave. In January 2023, nearly 10 months earlier, Mica packed her belongings and returned to Kansas to stay with her family. For a time, it appeared she was beginning a new chapter. She became involved with a new church, rebuilt friendships, and made plans for the months ahead. Then, something changed. Without public explanation, Mica returned to Myrtle Beach and reunited with John Paul. Around that time, her friend Shane and French received a message saying the couple had reconciled and that Mica was coming home. To many people who knew her, it sounded like a fresh start. Only later, after everything that followed became public, would investigators, family members, and those closest to Mica look back at that decision with renewed attention. In February 2024, Mica was admitted to a mental health facility. Almost immediately afterward, a major development followed. Her pending divorce case was withdrawn. To those around her, the timing didn't initially seem unusual. Friends believed she was stepping away from the legal process to focus on her health, but later accounts painted a far more complicated picture. They claimed her admission had not been voluntary and had been arranged by her husband. While Mica remained in treatment, several things changed back home. Most of her belongings were moved out of the house and placed in storage. Around the same time, the files stored on her phone and computer were reportedly erased. When she was released, she discovered she could no longer access her email, iCloud account, or Facebook. The passwords had all been changed. According to those close to her, Mica had spent weeks quietly collecting documents she believed would support her divorce case. After she returned, that material was gone. Then there was her car. While Mica was in treatment, John Paul took control of the vehicle. He later said he did so out of concern for her well-being. Mica, however, reported to police that she had effectively been deprived of access to it. When investigators spoke with John Paul, he said he was worried she might make reckless financial decisions if the vehicle was returned. Because the car was considered shared marital property, authorities did not file criminal charges, and the matter was closed. Not long after leaving the treatment facility, Mica moved in with her sister. For the first time in months, there was real physical distance between her and John Paul. It looked like she was finally creating space to rebuild her life. But that distance would prove to be temporary. And before long, the conflict between them would escalate again. Mica's decision to move in with her sister did not bring the conflict to an end. According to her sister's later account, John Paul began sending a series of messages soon after Mica left. She described them as increasingly persistent, saying he made it clear he had no intention of accepting the separation. Then the situation escalated. One evening, according to the 911 call and later public reporting,
John Paul arrived at the house while armed and refused to leave unless Mica returned home with him. Fearing the situation could get worse, Mica's sister called 911. During that call, she told the dispatcher that John Paul had also made statements about harming himself and said she believed he was trying to pressure Mica into coming back. Law enforcement responded to the residents. What happened over the following days has never been fully explained publicly. But not long afterward, Mica returned to the marital home. For many people following the case, that decision was difficult to understand. Those closest to Mica later described someone caught in an emotionally complicated situation, trying to leave a marriage they believed had become increasingly difficult to escape. The separation had come to an end, but in the weeks that followed, the relationship continued to deteriorate, setting the stage for the final chapter of Mica's story. By March 2024, Mica began reporting a series of incidents that left her increasingly concerned for her safety. Twice within the same week, she discovered that the tires on her vehicle had been slashed. She took the car to a dealership for repairs, and during the inspection, a technician found something unexpected inside one of the damaged tires: a small GPS tracking device. For Mica, the discovery appeared to confirm what she had already suspected. She had previously described feeling monitored. Now, she believed she had physical evidence that someone had been tracking her movements. Later that same day, while she was still at the dealership, another incident unfolded. According to police records and later reporting, a man Mica had reportedly been trying to avoid approached her. She immediately took out her phone and began recording the encounter.
You'll be in jail in a few hours.
Before she could capture much of the interaction, the man walked away. But according to Mica, he warned her that posting anything about him online could lead to legal consequences. The encounter added to her growing concerns.
Mica later told law enforcement
She believed more than one person was following her, and she petitioned the court for a restraining order. Not everyone accepted her account. Some people close to the situation questioned whether the incidents reflected a genuine threat or were connected to her mental health struggles. Her family strongly disagreed, maintaining that Mica was thinking clearly and that her concerns should be taken seriously. John Paul later offered a different explanation. He said any tracking device associated with the vehicle had been intended for her safety. Then, within days, another discovery. Mica reported finding a second GPS tracking device on her car. This time, she believed she knew who was responsible. The following day, she returned to court and filed for divorce once again. For the second time in less than a year, Mica was asking the legal system to end the marriage.
April 27th, 2024, a Saturday. Ring camera footage captured Mica leaving her apartment complex during the early afternoon. A short time later, surveillance cameras recorded her at a nearby pawn shop, where she made a purchase that investigators would later connect to the events of that day. From there, traffic cameras tracked her black Honda Accord traveling north, leaving Myrtle Beach and crossing into North Carolina. Along the way, she made a brief stop for gas before continuing toward Lumber River State Park. At 2:54 p.m., Mica arrived at the park. Minutes later, she placed a call to 911. During the call, she provided her location and conveyed information that would later lead emergency responders to the area.
The location of my phone.
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
A national park.
What's the phone number you're calling me from? Where's the park located at?
In Bear Bluff. I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find My Phone is on. I just did my location.
Okay, I'm showing, I don't think you are in Robeson County. Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Tell me what's, happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
The recording would become an important part of the investigation. Nearby, a fisherman named Johnny Jacobs was out on the river. He later told investigators he heard a woman crying somewhere beyond the trees. A few moments later, the crying stopped. Then, a loud sound echoed through the park.
Approximately 20 minutes after the 911 call, law enforcement officers arrived and began searching the area. Jacobs approached investigators and described what he had heard. He also directed them to a backpack that had been left near the riverbank. Inside were personal belongings later identified as Mica's. Later that afternoon, a kayaker on the river spotted something in the water and alerted authorities. By evening, investigators had secured the scene, collecting physical evidence that would later help establish the sequence of events from earlier that afternoon. In the weeks that followed, the medical examiner issued an official ruling. For investigators, that concluded the official determination of Mica's death. For her family, however, and for many people who had followed the events leading up to that day, it marked the beginning of a much broader debate, one that continues today. In the days following Mica's death, investigators worked to reconstruct her final movements. Evidence recovered at Lumber River State Park, together with surveillance footage and traffic camera recordings, helped establish a detailed timeline of where she had been, what investigators believed she had done, and when she arrived at the park. On May 6, 2024, The North Carolina Office of the Chief Medical Examiner released its official ruling. For many people, the case appeared to be over. For Mica's family and several people close to her, it was anything but.
Less than 24 hours after learning of Mica's death, John Paul stood before his congregation at Solid Rock Church. He did not announce the news at the beginning of the service. Instead, he continued with the sermon. Only near the end did he ask the congregation to leave quietly before telling them that Mica had died. The moment was recorded and quickly spread online. In the days that followed, John Paul gave interviews and remained active in public. His appearance and demeanor became a topic of intense discussion. Many viewers questioned how he presented himself in the days after Mica's death, while others cautioned that grief can look very different from one person to another and should not be treated as evidence of wrongdoing. As public attention grew, more people began sharing their own experiences. One of them was a woman named Christiana. She said that months before Mica's death, John Paul had given her his phone number while she was working, along with a generous tip. After learning that Mica had died, Christiana contacted him again. According to her account, his replies struck her as unexpectedly casual, an interaction she later shared publicly as interest in the case intensified.
And she was surprised at his response, to say the least. Christiana joins us now. Thanks so much for coming on the show. What did he say?
Well, I asked him if anything was new, and he more or less said, yes, lots new, LOL. I'll text later.
Then, another piece of footage resurfaced.
One of John Paul's
Years earlier, a neighbor named Ty Longerbeam had recorded John Paul outside his home during what appeared to be a personal dispute.
After Mica's death, that video spread widely across social media, accompanied by commentary from people who questioned whether the public image John Paul had presented over the years matched what was happening behind closed doors. For Mica's family, the medical examiner's ruling did not bring the matter to a close. Instead, it marked the beginning of a public effort to challenge the official conclusion. Her sister became one of the family's most visible voices, speaking in interviews about what Mica had shared with those closest to her during the years leading up to her death. According to her sister, Mica had described a marriage shaped by control, emotional pressure, and repeated attempts to leave. She also said Mica had expressed fears about how her death might one day be explained if something happened to her. Those statements resonated with many people following the case. In the weeks that followed, former members of Solid Rock Church, local residents, and supporters gathered outside the church. Demonstrations drew growing crowds, with participants calling for greater accountability and a more thorough examination of the circumstances surrounding Mica's death. Throughout that period, John Paul consistently rejected suggestions that he had played a role in what happened. In public statements, he maintained that Mica's death was the result of her personal struggles and denied wrongdoing. The public attention extended well beyond the people directly involved. Johnny Jacobs, the fisherman who had helped investigators after hearing distress in the park, unexpectedly found himself at the center of online speculation. Despite no public evidence linking him to any criminal conduct, he became the subject of criticism and accusations on social media, a reflection of how quickly unanswered questions can draw innocent people into the spotlight. By July 2024, one chapter of the dispute appeared to be coming to an end. John Paul Miller and Mica's family reached a civil settlement that resolved several ongoing disputes involving the estate, the church, and related legal matters. As part of the agreement, Mica's family withdrew their request to have her sister appointed as the special administrator of the estate.
Attorneys representing both sides described the settlement as an effort to end the immediate legal conflict and allow everyone involved to move forward. For a time, it appeared the courtroom battles might finally be over. They weren't. Beginning in 2025, John Paul launched a series of civil lawsuits against people who had publicly criticized him. The defendants included protesters, online commentators, former members of Solid Rock Church, and others who had spoken about the case on social media or in interviews. Altogether, the filings grew to nearly 36 separate lawsuits. One of the most closely watched involved Sam Rickman, a former friend and church member. The case went before a civil jury in August 2025. After hearing the evidence, the jury returned a verdict against John Paul.
By December 2025, the case took its most significant legal turn. A federal grand jury returned an indictment against John Paul Miller, marking the first time he faced criminal charges connected to the events surrounding Mica's final years. The indictment included 2 federal charges: cyberstalking and making false statements to federal investigators. According to prosecutors, the alleged conduct began in November 2022 and continued through the period leading up to Mica's death. The indictment alleges that John Paul repeatedly harassed Mica over that time. Among the allegations are that he shared an intimate image of her without permission, placed GPS tracking devices on her vehicle, and on one occasion, contacted her more than 50 times in a single day. The second charge focuses on statements he allegedly made during the federal investigation. Prosecutors allege that John Paul told investigators he had hired a private investigator to prevent Mica from purchasing a firearm. Federal authorities contend the investigator had actually been retained to monitor Mica because of suspicions that she was being unfaithful. The indictment also alleges that he falsely denied damaging the tires on her vehicle. On January 12, 2026, John Paul appeared in federal court in Florence, South Carolina, where he entered a plea of not guilty.
The court released him on a $100,000 bond under several conditions. He was ordered to wear an electronic monitoring device, prohibited from contacting Mica's family or potential witnesses, and required to surrender his passport while the case moved forward. It's important to understand what these charges do and do not allege. The indictment does not accuse John Paul of causing Mica's death, and the official ruling on her death has not changed. Instead, federal prosecutors allege a sustained pattern of conduct during the years leading up to her death, allegations that will ultimately be tested in court. At the time of this recording, the criminal case remains ongoing, and John Paul Miller is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law.
As of this recording, John Paul Miller's federal criminal case remains ongoing. Throughout 2026, the trial was postponed multiple times, from April to June, then July, as the defense requested additional time to review evidence disclosed during the case. The proceedings have since been continued to the September 2026 court term, with no final trial date announced at the time of this recording. John Paul remains free on bond under court-ordered conditions. He is required to wear an electronic monitoring device, may not leave South Carolina without the court's approval, and is prohibited from contacting Mica's family or individuals expected to testify in the case. Meanwhile, the official ruling on Mica's death has not changed. No criminal charge has been filed alleging that John Paul caused her death. What has changed is the scope of the legal proceedings surrounding the years leading up to it. Those allegations are now the subject of an active federal prosecution, where they will ultimately be tested in court.
More than 2 years After Mica's death, the case continues to draw national attention. Whether the federal proceedings will answer the questions that have followed this case from the beginning remains to be seen. Every case like this eventually asks the same question, in one form or another. Where does responsibility end, and where does consequence begin? Officially, no one has ever been charged in Mica Miller's death. Unofficially, a federal courtroom in South Carolina is now examining in detail everything that happened in the years before it. And that process is still ongoing. Some questions in this case may never be answered the way people want them to be, but they haven't stopped being asked. And as long as a case is still open, neither will we. If you want to know how this ends, once it finally does, subscribe. This is one of the few true crime cases still actively developing in real time. And we'll be covering every update the moment it happens.